All right, guys. So, yeah, today's presentation is brought to you together by Go Native Project, formerly Let's Go Study Australia, and also Questra Immigration. So, the topic that we'll be covering today is how to get your Australian PR by studying a trade course. So, if you're looking for pathways to stay in Australia, obviously, this presentation is of big interest to you. Just to make a point about, studying a trade or studying any particular program with a pathway to PR, as you'll see throughout this seminar or Ask the Migration Agent series, that nothing is a given in life. There's a lot of steps to undertake to reach your PR target, whether that's dedicating to your studies and then focusing on employability and working in your chosen trade or occupation, and then basically building up your points to be able to apply for PR, whether it's through general skilled migration or then later on through employer-sponsored visa, where you'd have to undertake a skills assessment process and also fulfill work experience requirements for one visa subclass or the other. But we'll get through that today throughout today's webinar. Just to touch on today's agenda, so we'll do a little bit of an introduction. Then we'll talk about the advantages of studying a trade course. We'll also have a look at the different sort of trade courses available in Australia. We'll also have a look then, more importantly, on excuse me, the Job Ready program, which in essence, you start whilst you're studying your trade qualification, with the Provisional Skills Assessment, which is also a mandatory requirement when you're applying for the postgraduate 485 visa in the graduate work stream. And then we'll look at all those steps required to fulfill the Job Ready program, achieve a positive skills assessment, which you can then use for migration purposes, whether it's a temporary work visa, which can transition to permanent residency, whether it's a general skilled migration visa, 491, which can transition to a 191 permanent residency visa, or 190 or 189, which are permanent visas off the bat. A little bit about myself. So, yeah, it's Bill Matroulis. Obviously, I'm founder, director, and a registered migration agent with migration registration number 157423. I've been registered for 5 or 6 years now, so we've got to update this this slide. I'm undercutting myself. Throughout my career as a registered migration agent and as an education counsellor, I've assisted in hundreds of student visa applications since 2015, when I've been registered as a migration agent. Also done tens of graduate visas, employer sponsorship visas, family visas, including parent visas, partner visas, and also many permanent sponsored visas, 186 visas. So we can help with the whole suite of visas in a number of visa categories, and nothing gives us more pleasure than seeing that whole cycle from student to PR and even to citizenship. So we've had a lot of our clients successfully apply for citizenship who came here to study ALICOS initially, then did a trade course, applied for the graduate visa, undertook the Job Ready program, this process that we're going to go through today in detail, then either applied for a skilled visa, or were sponsored by the employer, transitioned to permanent residency, and then ultimately also have gained Australian citizenship. And that's why we're in this game, and that's what gives us the most pleasure. So be rest assured that we're looking to fulfill that cycle for all our clients. I'm a member of the Migration Institute of Australia since 2015 as well. So that's the peak body for professional or registered migration agents. And as mentioned a little bit earlier, also a qualified education agent counsellor since 2012. So let's have a look at some of the advantages of studying a trade course. So I guess you can find a plethora of trade courses that are on the good list. When we say the good list, we refer to the medium, long-term skilled occupation list. So what that means is it qualifies you, or those particular occupations are deemed to be in more demand by the Australian government. So it gives you a few more options in terms of permanent residency. So if it's an employer-sponsored visa, you can transition to permanent residency after working for your employer on a TSS visa for 3 years. If we're looking at general skilled migration visas, it makes you eligible for the skilled independent 189 visa, although that program is sort of being put on hold at the moment since the advent of COVID, and I'm not sure how beneficial that program, or how that program will be used moving forward. But all things being equal, the 189 is a permanent visa, and your occupation needs to be on the medium to long-term occupation list. That's a distinct advantage of studying a trade course, which appears on the medium to long-term list. The other major advantage is that obviously there's a lot of job opportunities. So I was with a client of mine a little bit earlier, and we're looking at carpentry, for example, and just in Melbourne, if you look on Seek, there's 2,000 jobs at the moment advertised for carpenters, joiners, and that subcategory of occupations. So, and more important than ever, if you're looking for a migration outcome or for a permanent residency outcome, what you've got to do is you've got to look at employability. So where are the jobs? So a main aspect of this process that we're going to look at today is employability. When you're studying your trade qualification, you've got to undertake 360 hours of either employment or work placement, practical placement, to actually get a provisional skills assessment, which makes you then eligible for the 485 visa. And then once you're on the 485 visa and you undertake the job ready program, you've got to work in paid employment in your nominated occupation for 12 months to be able to get a positive skills assessment, which then, as I said, you can use for migration purposes. Moreover, if you want to apply for an employer-sponsored visa, then you're going to have 2 years post qualification work experience in your nominated occupation. So, what that all means is that employability is a key, so is really important. So if you aren't able to get employment in your occupation, in any occupation, even if you're an engineer, then if you look at a lot of the state programs, there's a residency and employment requirement. So, in South Australia, generally speaking, you need to live there and work in your nominated occupation or a closely related occupation for 6 months. And the same applies for for many other state programs. So employability is of paramount importance. And also, studying a trade helps your employability because there's a lot of opportunities. And if you look at the hospitality industry, there's a big skill shortage at the moment. And we're really busy doing employer sponsorship visas for chefs at the moment, because the power has sort of swung from the employers to the students, or to the chefs. Because if you're working for a restaurant or a cafe and they're not prepared to sponsor you, then you can just go work for another restaurant, and by all means, they'll be prepared to sponsor you. Because if someone can guarantee or lock in an employee for the next 4 years, that's amazing for the restaurant. It's a win-win situation for the applicant. They can have the opportunity then to transition to permanent residency, and the restaurant gets to retain a quality chef, or a valuable employee or asset, at least for the next 3-4 years. So it's a win-win situation. So again, job opportunities, again, paramount importance, and employability. Highly paid, so all trade occupations, especially if you're skilled and you've completed your qualification, and then you've got a positive skill assessment, you've validated your education and your work experience. Most trades pay in the vicinity, of 55 to 70,000 annually, and that's plus superannuation. And if you're going to go for a employer sponsorship visa, you're going to command a salary at least of 53,900 per year. However, that's not to say that it could be higher. So depending on what the market rate is, and if there's an equivalent Australian employee or permanent resident doing the same job, you need to get paid the same as that person. So once you are qualified and you've validated your work experience, you can command a very good wage, because there is also skills shortages evident in a plethora of trade occupations. Then you can rest assured that you can command a pretty good salary. The course fees are also affordable, which I know is super important for international students. There's flexible payment plans, and also, compared to a bachelor or a master's degree, you're looking at a third of the price. And again, as I said, also the flexibility of the payment plans facilitates you to be able to pay in installments, which is very helpful, I guess, for all international students. Just on the course fees, you can definitely reach out to Go Native project in Sydney, Angelica, and then also in Melbourne, Natalia Ponce. So any questions you have about course fees, timetables, locations, they're well schooled, and will be able to help with anything to do with course fees, timetables, and also intake dates. So what are the trade courses that you could study? And we like to sort of categorize them in 4 different sort of industries. So obviously hospitality is one industry, and we'll look at the courses later, but the main qualifications or occupations which link to an occupation on the medium term list is obviously pastry chef and chef. Also, there are some other occupations like restaurant and cafe manager. They're on a short-term list. However, you can't undertake the job ready program because the occupation is on the short-term list. And also, you can't apply for permanent residency for employer sponsorship or the 189 visa, because cafe and restaurant manager is on the short-term list. However, pastry chef and chef, you can most definitely apply for PR with those occupations. Automotive, obviously, the occupations and courses in that particular industry, motor mechanic general, heavy vehicle or diesel mechanic, also auto body repairer, and automotive electrician as well, which sort of overlaps a little bit with engineering as well. Building and construction, there's a number of occupations. Carpenter is the main one or most popular one, painting and decorating, wall and floor tiling, etc., etc. And we'll have a look closer in the next slides. Engineering, also there's a number of occupations, fabrication, trade, or also telecommunications engineer. So we'll have a look a lot closer. But the important thing is why we like to categorize them in these four different industries is that a lot of people might have qualification from their home country, and it's easier to sort of profile a particular student and sort of match them with the best sort of trade course for them. So this is how we like to categorize the different sort of trade courses, and we'll have a look at in the next slide the different courses that were available per industry. So automotive, you've got motor mechanic general, which appears on the medium to long-term list. The qualification you require is Certificate 3 in light vehicle mechanical technology. However, when you do that course, we usually package it with the Cert 4 and Diploma of Automotive Management. So it can, so the duration of the course can be 2 years, and that enables you to satisfy the Australian study requirement. Because you've got a Cert 3 in light vehicle mechanical technology, that satisfies the TRA requirement for the provisional skills assessment. And because you've studied a package which with a duration of 2 years that are closely related, then that satisfies the requirement of the Department of Home Affairs to apply for the postgraduate 485 visa in the graduate work stream. Similarly, there's automotive electrician, which is Certificate 3 in automotive electrical technology. Again, you would do a 2-year package, and the same applies for Cert 3 in heavy commercial vehicle mechanical technology, which would qualify you for the occupation diesel motor mechanic. Building and construction, we've got Certificate 3 in carpentry. So some colleges have a Certificate 3 which with a duration of 2 years. Other colleges have Certificate 3 in carpentry which goes for 1 year, and then you can attach that a Certificate 4 or Diploma of Building and Construction building. There has been a lot of talk about this particular training package, carpentry. Depending on the case officer, there has been issues when people have studied Certificate 3 coupled with Cert 4 or Diploma in Building and Construction Management. So my recommendation to alleviate any issues or future issues with the department would be to package Certificate 3 carpentry with Cert 4 Diploma of Building and Construction building. So that's an important thing to note, and especially if you're wanting to apply for the 485 graduate postgraduate visa, you should definitely package that with building and construction brackets building. Certificate 3 in cabinet making or cabinet maker is another one. This is an excellent course, but there's not that many options. So in terms of where you can study, I think the only place you can study this particular program in Melbourne is in a TAFE, so Holmesglen TAFE, which is an amazing school, but the fees are a little bit more expensive, and also I guess the commitment would be 3 or 4 days, as opposed to some of these other private colleges. You could study 2 days a week. A lot of them also facilitate weekend study, so you can study on a Saturday and Sunday, whereas with cabinet making in a TAFE, you definitely would have to study 3 or 4 days a week during the week. Obviously, there wouldn't be as flexible payment plan either. You'd have to pay 6 months, every 6 months or every semester, similarly like you do for higher ed, so bachelor or masters. But notwithstanding all that, if you have got the propensity and you're interested in cabinet making, amazing course and also amazing opportunities. Certificate 3 in painting and decorating also. So usually that is a 12-month course as well, although some colleges also have that for a 2-year duration. So that's another one. Just on painting and decorating, before the COVID pandemic, there was a traffic light bulletin issued by the Department of Employment, and this was one of the occupations that was in the traffic light that was listed to go from the medium to long-term list to the short-term list, and whatever ramifications that has after that. But and that was scheduled to happen sometime last year, but nothing's happened. I'm not sure if it will happen, but it is something worth noting. Hospitality, we have commercial cookery and also patisserie. So whichever one you do, when you apply for the provisional skills assessment, you nominate the occupation chef. And then basically when you undertake the job ready program, if you're working in pastry, then that's fine. If you're working in commercial cookery, that's fine as well. You'll get a skills assessment when you complete the job ready program as a chef. As you can see there, same ANSCO code 351311, and that applies whether you do pastry or whether you do commercial cookery. Again, so some colleges at the moment have disbanded the certificate 3. So basically the usual training package is Cert 3 in commercial cookery. Cert 3 on its own qualifies you to be a cook, and then that usually goes for 12 months. Then you transition to Certificate 4, which is the AQF qualification for a chef. Now, from a TRA, Trades Recognition Authority perspective, and then that goes for 6 months, and then you supplement with a Diploma of Hospitality Management, another 6 months. That gives you the 2-year package. So the Cert 4 makes you eligible for the Provisional Skills Assessment with the TRA. The 2-year package with a Cert 3, Cert 4 Commercial Cookery, Diploma of Hospitality Management makes you eligible for the 485 visa, studied courses that are closely related or deemed closely related to the occupation chef, and then obviously on the 485 you undertake the job ready program, but we'll look into that a little bit further. Same goes for patisserie, Cert 3 patisserie, Cert 4 patisserie, Diploma of Hospitality Management, usually a 2-year package, which enables you then to apply for the postgraduate visa. Engineering, there's a couple of options as well. These are a little bit more trickier because there is, well, not all of them, but for example, Certificate 3 in air conditioning and refrigeration. This is a licensed occupation. So there's a couple of steps extra you need to take to apply for a permanent residency visa. Otherwise, yeah, again, you do a 2-year package. Some colleges might have it, you know, Cert 3, Cert 4 and Diploma in engineering. Same goes for Diploma of Electronics and Communications Engineering. So this particular one, you'd need to do a diploma. So certificate telecommunications engineering technology requires a certificate 4, and the occupation that relates to is radio communications technician 313212, and then there's fabrication trade as well. So which qualifies you for a metal fabricator. Again, the qualifications you see on the screen allow you to apply for a provisional skills assessment to the TRA. So that's the minimum AQF qualification required to apply for a provisional skills assessment. And then depending on the duration of the AQF, you might need to supplement with a closely related course to qualify for the postgraduate visa, because as we mentioned earlier, you need to satisfy the Australian study requirement. So you need to study for a duration of 2 years with qualifications closely related to your nominated occupation. So that's a bit of a snapshot of the courses. There are more courses as well. There are, a lot more courses available, and you can talk with Angelica in Sydney or Natalia in Melbourne to see the full range of courses that qualify you for the postgraduate visa, and then also allows you to undertake the Job Ready program to get your full skills assessment. So, yeah, as we discussed, the Job Ready program is the way that you are able to get a skills assessment. And with a skills assessment or a positive skills assessment, then that opens up options for permanent residency. So I guess the important thing to note is to be able to undertake the Job Ready program, you need to study towards an occupation or a position that is listed on the medium to long-term list. And also the Skills Assessment Authority is a trades recognition authority, so the TRA. Because then that will allow you to apply for the 485, to initially apply for a provisional skills assessment, which is step one. Then once your provisional skills assessment is, you have a positive outcome, and you've got less than 6 months on your student visa, or you've applied for your postgraduate visa, you can then apply for the Job Ready employment, right? And then that allows you to start counting hours towards your Job Ready workplace assessment, or JRWA. And then once you undertake the required hours in qualified employment in your nominated occupation, then you're able to get a Job Ready final assessment, or apply for the Job Ready final assessment, which will means you'll get your positive skills assessment outcome letter, which you can use for migration purposes. Now, the fees actually have gone down. The TRA, which is interesting and amazing. Usually things go up, but the TRA has actually reduced their fees. Well, for the provisional skills assessment. So usually it used to cost $300, but now it's $200 to apply for your provisional skills assessment. Job Ready employment is just registering your employer, and that was $500, and now it's $450. Although the Job Ready workplace assessment has gone up from 2,000 to 2,540. And this is the section where a workplace assessor or a liaison officer from the TRA actually comes to your workplace to see that you're actually working at the required skill level for your nominated occupation. And I guess they've put the price up for that one because there's a lot more work involved for them. And then your Job Ready final assessment, which is just the paperwork to get your skills assessment outcome letter, is a measly $65. But we'll look into all these steps in a lot more detail in the next slides. So what do you need in step one to get your provisional skills assessment. So you need to submit your trade qualification. So depending on your occupation, you'll need to submit, if you're studying carpentry, a Cert 3, cabinet making, a Cert 3, painting and decorating, a Cert 3, commercial cookery, Cert 4, patisserie, Cert 4. So depending on your occupation, you'll have to submit your trade qualification. Also, you'll have to submit evidence of 360 hours of either paid employment or a vocational work placement. So some colleges incorporate a vocational work placement in their course. So if you've done the vocational work placement and you've got that signed off by your employer and also your college, then that will suffice for the provisional skills assessment. Otherwise, you need to have 360 hours of pay slips from a employer. If you're working, if you're studying cookery, then it should be in a restaurant or cafe. If you're studying carpentry, it should be for a building and construction or formwork company. It doesn't necessarily need to be skilled employment. So, even if you're working as a kitchen hand, the 360 hours will suffice for the provisional skills assessment, because remember, you're actually undertaking these hours whilst you're still studying. So it doesn't need to be a skilled employment as such. But yeah, so the PSA, once you get the outcome letter, that means you're also eligible for the 485. So it's a mandatory requirement for the postgraduate visa. When we apply for the postgraduate visa, we don't necessarily need to have the outcome letter, but we need to upload or show proof that we've applied for the PSA to the TRA. It usually takes them about 2-3 months for them to adjudicate, and your 485 won't be approved until you've uploaded your outcome letter. On top of the 360 hours of pay slips, we also provide them a work statement from your employer. If you're working in a kitchen, we'll say that you've been working in a commercial kitchen. From this time to that time, this is the task that you've been doing, and this is the equipment that you've been using. Similarly, for carpentry, we'll say that you've been working on construction sites. These are the equipment you've been using, and these are the tasks that you've been doing. So it's not that difficult, but again, I guess I can't sort of stress enough, even to be able to apply for the postgraduate visa, you're going to need to have either secured a vocational placement for your college. If your college doesn't provide that, or it's not incorporated in their course, you're going to need to be employed in that industry. So again, I can't sort of stress enough, how important it is to try and get an opportunity within your chosen occupation, as early as possible. Step 2 is job-ready employment. So to undertake step 2, you need to have a positive provisional skills assessment. You need to have lodged or have granted your 485 postgraduate visa. You can do it before lodging, maximum of 6 months. That's why also we sort of stress to clients, although people don't mind being on a long bridging visa when they apply for the 485, because it sort of gives you more time to work full time. We sort of stress to our clients that as soon as you complete your Cert 4, you should apply for your provisional skills assessment, because the earlier you have your skills assessment, your provisional skills assessment outcome letter, the earlier we can start claiming job-ready employment hours. So, and what that means is the earlier you start counting your hours, the earlier you'll be able to get a positive skills assessment, and you'll be able to strategize your PR pathways. So you need to be working for an eligible employer. And your employer will need to complete employer verification reports. And you also need to be able to submit skilled progress reports to show the tasks that you're doing throughout your job. The third step is the job ready workplace assessment. So, and this is after you've completed 863 hours on the job ready program. And what this will include is an assessor or a liaison officer visiting your workplace and doing a practical on-ground test. And look, this might sound daunting, but the reality is, we've had about, and we manage the job ready program as well for our clients. And, we've had, over 50 clients participate in the job ready program, and not one of our clients has ever failed this practical ground test. Because if you've studied your trade qualification and you're working in your trade qualification from the time you've completed, Cert 3 in commercial cookery or Cert 4 in commercial cookery, then that hands-on experience coupled with your qualification really puts you in good stead to completing this practical ground test. So look, it does sound daunting, but if you're genuinely working in your occupation and you've dedicated yourself to your industry, and you're focused on your studies and on your work, this is no problem whatsoever. And like I've said, 100% of our clients have, we've got 100% strike rate. All our clients have passed the workplace assessment. All right, so and step 4 is a job ready final assessment. So provided you've completed your on-ground assessment, then you've completed 1,725 hours, which are approved by the TRA. And how they are approved? They're approved by pay slips, if you're a subcontractor, invoices. So once you've collected 725 hours of pay slips and we've uploaded and sent it to the TRA, then we fill out a couple of forms, pay that $65 fee, and then within 1 month, depending on your situation, you get your outcome letter. Now, just on this as well, so the TRA is pretty good. We've had clients who have had pending 485 visa end dates, and we've had to get an outcome letter quicker, so we then can apply for skilled migration, whether 491 or 190, and the TRA has generally worked with us on that. And just a few months ago, we had a 491 visa granted for a diesel mechanic in regional New South Wales, and he finished his 1,725 hours about 6 weeks before his 485 visa was going to expire. With our help, we were able to negotiate an early outcome letter from the TRA. We did his expression of interest. We did the application to the RDA. We got a nomination approved, and he got an invitation. And within that 6-week period of time, we were able to apply for a 491 visa, which incidentally has now been approved. And now this particular client is working towards his 3 years on the 491 visa to be able to transition to the 191 visa, which is a permanent visa. All right, so that's a bit of a wrap up about the Job Ready program. The reason why we sort of spent so much time on the Job Ready program is because it's really important. You've got to really understand the skills assessment process. You've got to work backwards and understand the skills assessment process, because And the TRA gives you, or the Job Ready program gives you an amazing opportunity to get a skills assessment. Because if you're trying to get a skills assessment as a chef or a carpenter, and you're relying on work experience or an overseas qualification, you would have to have 3 years work experience as a chef or a carpenter, for example, and 12 months in the last 3 years. However, with the Job Ready program, all you need to do is have 1 year work experience post your certificate 4 to get a positive skills assessment in your nominated occupation, and that then opens up the door to a number of permanent visa options. So it's an amazing opportunity, and it's an amazing platform for international students to fast track their skills assessment and give themselves the best opportunity for permanent residency. So what happens when you've got the positive outcome from the Job Ready program or the TRA? So, well, you're eligible for general skilled migration. And that's the 189 visa, because the occupation you've studied is on the medium to long-term list. The 190, however, we also need to look at state lists, although most trades are on the state list as well. And also the regional 491 visa. But again, the occupation needs to appear on the relevant state list. So yeah, that's not an issue there. You need to have a minimum of 65 points, right? So that will depend on your age, your work experience, your relationship status, your English language ability. So you'll get 5 points for completing the Job Ready program, because you'll have more than 1 year work experience in Australia in your nominated occupation. You also get 5 points for completing the Australian study requirement. Remember, we need to study for 2 years, and they need to also be closely related to your occupation. But for the purpose of points, just studying 2 years, certificate 3, 4, diploma, bachelor or master's, whatever it is, will give you 5 points. You also get 5 points if you're nominated for the 190 visa. You can get 15 points if you're nominated for the skilled regional 491 visa. However, if you don't have enough points, then you can also consider regional migration or employer sponsorship. We'll have a look at employer sponsorship as well. So TSS 482 employer sponsorship visa requires you to have 2 years work experience post your qualification. So if you're a carpenter or you studied carpentry, you need to have 2 years work experience post your certificate 3. So after the completion of your certificate 3. If you're a chef, then you'll need to have 2 years work experience post the completion of your certificate 4. The TSS visa, when we're nominating an occupation on the medium-term list, is a 4-year visa. And after 3 years, you can transition to permanent residency. So that's another very useful pathway to permanent residency. So what we'll do now, guys, is we'll get onto your questions. Look, we had a lot of amazing questions. There was a lot of overlap because a lot of people are sort of asking the same thing. There were some questions that weren't topical that we've excluded, but rest assured, in our next migration agent, Ask the Migration Agent seminars or sessions, we will include those questions if it is related to a particular topic. But time-wise, and also just to sort of keep everything topical, we've selected the questions that relate to this particular webinar. So Antoinette has asked, after certificate 4 of commercial cookery, what's the best visa option to get the PR, sponsorship, TRA, any other? Antoinette, good question. Well, I guess you'd have to study the diploma as well in hospitality management, because that will make you eligible for the 485. The beauty of the 485 is that it gives you the flexibility to work full time, and also the flexibility to move to any particular state that is advantageous for your PR prospects. So unlike when you're on a student visa and you're studying, you really need to be in the city where you're studying, because you need to go to class, or maybe not at the moment because it's all online, but for these practical programs, yes, you need to go to the workshop or the warehouse or to the kitchen. So you're sort of limited. You can't move whilst you're studying, but when you're on the 485, you've got the opportunity to move wherever it is advantageous for you to get a PR outcome. So once you've completed the Cert 4, you can apply for the Provisional Skills Assessment. And then basically, once you have your positive outcome letter, you can then start your job-ready employment. So you're able to accumulate the required 1,725 hours as early as possible to give you that extra sort of time to maneuver and strategize for a permanent residency outcome. Sponsorship is a good option as well, as we said, but you'd have to wait 2 years or accumulate 2 years of work experience before you're eligible for employer sponsorship. So in a nutshell, I guess all of the above. You need to do the TRA Provisional Skills Assessment and Job Ready program. You'd also need to keep your options open for employer sponsorship, because we don't know what's going to happen with points and which states are nominating chef, although most are. So yeah, I think you need to be wary, and you need to do a number of tasks, which includes those, to give yourself the best opportunity of permanent residency. Question by Malena. How start my permanent residency process studying carpentry? Same thing as a question before. So as soon as you've completed your Certificate 3 in carpentry, apply for your Provisional Skills Assessment at the TRA. Once you've got your outcome letter, start job-ready employment, or once you're on your 485, start job-ready employment, undertake the job-ready program, get your positive skills assessment outcome letter as soon as possible, and then either apply for your employer sponsorship or general skilled migration, state nominated 190 or regional skilled regional 491. So that would be the similar sort of process as cookery, exactly the same. From Yasi, how long should the course last to obtain the PR? On 1 year or more? Okay, well, so yeah, look, as we've said throughout the webinar, so you need to do the minimum AQF qualification for the TRA. So that would be, for cookery, Certificate 4, for patisserie, Certificate 4 in patisserie, for carpentry, Certificate 3, for metal fabrication, Certificate 3, etc., etc. That makes you eligible for the Provisional Skills Assessment. However, to be eligible for the 485, you need your Provisional Skills Assessment outcome letter, but you also need to satisfy the 2-year study requirement. So you need to study a training package that's closely related to your nominated occupation that includes the minimum AQF qualification, and it needs to be for a duration of 2 years. Then you apply for the postgraduate visa. You undertake the job ready program, and you either, once you've got your skills assessment, you either apply for general skilled migration, or if you haven't got enough points, then you apply for employer sponsorship. So how long? It's 2 years of study, 18 months of postgraduate visa, and then depending on whether you achieve a 491, then you'll need to spend another 3 years on the skilled regional visa before you're eligible for the 191 visa. If you are able to get a 190 visa, state nominated, then you'll be PR straight away. If you apply for the employer sponsorship, you'll have to work for your sponsor for 3 years before you're eligible for permanent residency. So, I guess the answer in general, and what should everyone should sort of have on their mind, is that there's no easy way or shortcuts. So you really need to dedicate the next 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 years of your careers on your nominated occupation. So 2 years study, 2 years postgraduate visa, there or thereabouts, maybe PR if you're lucky enough after that, maybe another 3 years before you're apply or you're granted a 491 regional visa, another 3 years before you can apply for PR through the 191 residency visa. Okay, question by Angelica. Can I get PR with hospitality, not cookery? All right, so I guess you're sort of wondering then if you're a cafe or restaurant manager, because that's the only hospitality occupation that's on the list. Unfortunately, that occupation is on the short-term list, right? So what that means is that the only you won't be eligible to apply for the postgraduate visa if you studied a diploma of hospitality management, because it's on the short-term list. You can be sponsored for a TSS visa, but it will only be a 2+2 year visa. So, and you won't be able to transition to permanent residency, like a medium to long-term occupation. So your only options for permanent residency through being a restaurant or cafe manager is through the 491 visa, the skilled regional 491 visa, or the 190 visa. So your occupation would need to be on the respective state list that you're pursuing, and that would be the only way you'd be able to achieve permanent residency. Good question, very good question, but Angelica, thanks for that. A question by Camilla. How to apply to painting and decoration trade? I would imagine it's a similar question to the first couple that we had for carpentry and also cookery. Yeah, so you'd have to do a certificate 3 in painting and decorating. If that certificate 3 has a duration of 1 year, you'd have to package that with a certificate 4 or diploma in building and construction building to satisfy the Australian study requirement to be eligible then for the postgraduate visa. You'd have to undertake the job ready program. So you'd have to complete 1,725 hours as a painter and decorator from an approved employer, get a positive skills assessment, and then towards the end of your graduate visa, either be eligible for 190, 491, or employer sponsorship. So for all these trades, the process is exactly the same. Depending on your occupation, though, there could be differences in which state, territory you can be nominated, and there's differences in qualifications. So in terms of what level, for cookery, you need to do Cert 4. For carpentry and painting and decorating, you need to do at least Cert 3. So that's the main differences. Diana, steps to obtain a permanent visa and how long the process lasts. How long's a piece of string? I think we've gone through the steps in those previous questions. So again, provisional skills assessment, graduate visa, job ready program, either general skilled migration or employer sponsorship. So I think we've covered that one, Diana. I hope it's you've got the answer from the previous questions as well. Carolina, Lady Carolina, how long it takes to get the PR after finishing a trade course? Yeah, again, so there's a lot of overlap in these questions, but another good question. But yeah, look, so we might look at the different subclasses in a little bit more detail. I think that will help as well. So, again, 2 years of study, 18 months of postgraduate visa. All right. Also, you'll be on a bridging visa from the time your student visa ends until your graduate visa is granted. So we're looking, let's say 2 years student visa, 2 years postgraduate visa, including the time spent on a bridging visa, whilst your graduate visa is being assessed. Now, the 3 different options, or 2 different options: general skilled migration. If you apply for the 491, or you get invited for the 491, then on top of that 4 years, so study and postgraduate visa, you'll need to spend another 3 years on the 491 visa to transition to permanent residency. Right. So a little bit more about the 491. Obviously, you need to be nominated or to live in a designated regional area. So whilst you're on the 491 visa, you can move between regional areas. So you can move from Adelaide to Cairns, to Perth, to Gold Coast, to Canberra, to Hobart, to Geelong, but you can't move or live and work in Melbourne, Sydney, or Brisbane. Okay. The other thing that you need to do whilst you're on a 491 visa is each year you need to earn 53,900 plus superannuation. That could be combined. So if you're a couple, you can combine both your incomes. But the interesting thing to note is that you don't have to work in the occupation that you've been nominated for whilst you're on the 491 visa. You can work in any occupation, but you need to earn 53,900 for 3 years before you're eligible to apply for the permanent residency visa, which is the 191. It's a little bit restrictive in the 491. However, it is a good option, and it is very attractive for a lot of international students, because remember, you also get an extra 15 points if you're nominated. And the points required for the 491 are generally lower than the 190, the state nominated visa, because the government is keen to sort of populate or build the economies of these regional areas. And the idea is, if you spend 3 years in a regional area, you would have built up your network of friends, your professional network. If you've got kids, they might have started school. So if you've spent 3 years in a regional area, even after when you're applied or granted permanent residency, you're more likely to stay there. So that's why the restrictions are in place. And that's why people are encouraged to apply for the 491. And I'll just show you guys as well, for example, if you have a look at say, for example, the number of spots that are eligible for the 491. So if you're looking at Canberra, there's 600 spots allocated for the 190, but 1,400 for the 491. New South Wales is about similar, 4,000, 3,640. Victoria is actually skewed towards the 190 visa. So there's 3,500 spots in this financial year allocated for the 190 and 500 for the 491. Queensland, there's more spots for the 491, 1,250. And their program has just reopened. And they've got an expansive list. So any eligible occupation is actually eligible. But yeah, there's some residency and work experience requirements that you need to sort of look at. Northern Territory has 500 in each category. WA has 1,100 for the 190 and 3,400 for the 491. South Australia has an even spread, and that's a really big allocation for an area like South Australia. So 2,600 each, and Tasmania has 2,000, double the amount of spots for the 491 than the 190. So you've got to sort of keep an eye on these sort of allocations because competition is hot, and you look at WA, for example, that's a big place, but really their allocation is tiny. Then you look at Sydney, which looks big, but there's so many more international students that are in Sydney. So is it really bigger, or are there more opportunities? You beg the question. And then Tasmania, 2,200 spots, and there's a lot less international students or in Tasmania. So that looks like an interesting sort of place to be. So yeah, just sort of, it's good to keep an eye on the allocation as well, because that sort of dictates how many spots are available in each particular state. And Carolina, and if you were then to apply through TSS employer sponsorship, it would be another 3 years before you could apply for PR. So 2 years on a graduate visa, 2 years study, 2 years graduate visa, 3 years on an employer sponsorship visa. So it's 7 years before you can apply for PR. But yeah, if you're on an employer sponsorship visa, you get a 4-year contract. It would be at least 55 to 65,000 salary per year plus superannuation. And then after 3 years, you transition to PR. Not the end of the world. So I hope that answered your question, Lady Carolina. Marley, okay, best city to get permanent resident. So yeah, well, that sort of goes on to what we sort of what we looked at before. But we'll have a look as well. So it's interesting, and you guys should also keep an eye on. There's a lot of graduate pathways. So again, best city for PR. If you look at this, Tasmania and South Australia have got good opportunities. Also, regional Queensland's pretty good. New South Wales and Victoria have a big allocation, but there's also big populations as well of international students. But it also depends on your occupation. So you've got to look at is your occupation on a particular state list? What are the residency? What are the work experience requirements? So look, it's difficult to ask that question on a general sort of scale. Usually what we do in a client consultation, we can answer that type of question because we've got a snapshot of your profile. We know about your work experience. We know where you've studied. We know a number of things that can determine where's the best city to get PR. But most definitely, that's the type of answer we can provide for you in an initial consultation, where after the initial consultation, once we've got all your facts, all the facts of your situation and a complete snapshot of your profile, we're able to send you a migration plan which sort of details or recommends where your best permanent residency options are. Yeah. So, but look, regional New South Wales, I think it's important to also look at graduate streams. So regional New South Wales has a graduate stream. Also, South Australia has a international graduate stream, which has plenty of waivers. If you've studied at least 1 year or 50% of your course in South Australia. Queensland only has a graduate stream if you study a master's or bachelor for the 491, and for the 190 a PhD. So that's a little bit restrictive. So if you're studying a trade, it probably doesn't help you. ACT doesn't have a graduate stream, but they've got a different process where it's a matrix. So depending on if you've studied there, how long you've lived there, how long you've worked there, what sort of family members you have there, that all goes onto your matrix points. So the more matrix points you have, I guess the better opportunity you'll have to get nominated in ACT. But yeah, so and obviously living there, studying there, working there, the longer you've been living, studying and working there, definitely maximizes your chances of getting a nomination in ACT. WA has a good graduate stream, but there's not that many spots up for grabs. But you can study a vocational or trade course there, and you can then take advantage of their graduate stream. But there's not that many spots available. Northern Territory has a graduate stream as well. So and also Tasmania has a graduate stream as well. So there's a lot of spots up for grabs in Tasmania, and that's a pretty good place as well for permanent residency options, albeit through the 491. But then you're well on your way for PR once you get that particular visa granted. But really good question. But yeah, how long is a piece of string? I'm afraid, Marley. Is it possible to change school while I'm attending already one, carpentry? Pareja, it is possible, but look, the reality is probably the school is not obliged, or the college is not obliged to allow you to change schools, because the reality is you need to be the last 6 months of your principal course for the school to be obliged to release you. So unless you're in the last 6 months of your principal course, then you need to convince your current school, justify to them why you want to change schools. Now, there's a number of factors that can play a role, but look, and a lot of students are successful in changing colleges, but just as many are not. And the problem at the moment is that these challenging times for everyone, for students, for the education industry, for the migration industry. There's just such a small pool of students that even the colleges are struggling at the moment, and they, and they'll probably do their utmost to keep the students that they have enrolled, because they're not getting that many new students. So is it possible? Yes, particularly if you're in the last 6 months of your principal course. If not, then you need to convince the school, but they're not obliged to allow you to change colleges or schools. Pablo, just got my Cert 4 in patisserie, Cert 4 in cookery. Oh, well done. So you've done both. That's awesome, Pablo. An advanced diploma in hospitality. What are my options to get PR? Well, your options are pretty good, but you still need to undertake the steps and a couple of steps and processes. I'm not sure if you're experienced chef from your home country, or you've just undertaken, you've changed the career. If you've changed your career and just started studying commercial cookery in Australia, then you know, to get a skills assessment, you'll have to undertake the job ready program, and then depending on your employment circumstances, you can choose pastry or commercial cookery, and depending where you are in Australia, you may be able to apply for once you've got your positive skills assessment and you've completed your 1,725 hours, you might be able to apply for general skilled migration. You need to do an expression of interest. You need to be invited or nominated by a state government for either the 491 or the 190, and then you can apply for the visa, or you know, you'd have to get 2 years experience post either Cert 4 patisserie or cookery, and be eligible for an employer-sponsored visa. If you've got experience from back home, and we're able to get a skills assessment without doing the job ready program, you might also be eligible for 186 employer nomination scheme, which is direct entry, and we've been doing plenty of those in the last year, because like I said, you know, restaurants are keen to retain their valuable staff. So we've been doing a lot of TSS visas, also 186 visas direct entry for chefs. Chef is also on the migration priority list, so we're getting pretty quick outcomes. So yeah, it depends on your situation, but all things being equal, Pablo, I would think you'd need to apply for the provisional skills assessment, apply for the postgraduate visa, and then undertake the job ready program. Yuli, with how many points can I apply for the PR? Good question. So I think we've sort of touched on this a little bit earlier, but you know, generally speaking, for the 491, or the regional 491, less points are required than the state nominated 190 visa. In saying that, we recently had a approved nomination for a chef in Victoria under the workforce skills pathway with 65 points. So that's a pathway just for chefs and cooks to fulfill skill shortages in the hospitality industry in Victoria. But generally speaking, I'd say, you know, 65 to 70 points would suffice for the 491, the regional visa. However, you know, 80 points plus would be required for the 190. Yeah, so the 190, you know, is generally a little bit more difficult because it's a PR visa straight away and you're a free agent once you get the 190. Although the 491, you know, including the generous 15 points for nomination, you know, generally speaking, I think 65, 70 points would suffice. You might have a bachelor degree from home, you get 15 points for that. You've got proficient English, another 10 points, 5 points for the Australian study requirement, 5 points for 1 year work experience if you've done the job ready program, 10 points if you're single. So, you know, most people would be there or thereabouts. I guess it's just being mindful of the residency and work experience requirements. But yeah, look, you know, anywhere for the 491, I would say 65 to 70 points. For the 190, 80 to 90 points. All right. That wraps up the Q&A. I'll just have a look at this to see. Okay, so Mario Polido has got a question here about carpentry. what I might do is, and this is what we generally do in an initial consultation, and when we send our clients a migration plan, we have all the list all the states where a particular occupation is eligible. So we'll just have a look at Mario at this as an example. So in our internal software, so let's have a look. So if I have a look at carpenter, I can tell you specifically, Mauro, you know, at the moment, so we can see that carpenter is on the medium to long-term list, so it's eligible for the 189, 190, 491, 485 again, because it's on the medium to long-term occupation list. TSS 482 in the medium to long-term stream. 186 direct entry, TRT, of course. So at the moment, for the 190, it's showing up in Northern Territory, WA, South Australia, New South Wales, Tasmania, ACT, Queensland. So I'm seeing a lot of green there. That's what we like to see, Mauro. Victoria doesn't actually have a list, so that's why it's not showing up in Victoria. You need to be working in a target sector. So that's the issue in Victoria. But again, that's the beauty of the 485 model. Once you've, you're on your 485, you've got 18 months left on your visa to undertake job ready program, which you should have already started. Then you can maneuver and move. New South Wales, South Australia, for example, you need to live there and work there for 6 months before you're eligible. Tasmania as well, if you haven't studied there. Queensland for 3 months, you need to live and work there. So for the 491, similar sort of situation. So everywhere except Victoria, unless you're working for in a target sector, or your employer is in a target sector. So there's a plethora of opportunities for carpenters at the moment, but you've got to be mindful of if you say Northern Territory, that's fine, but what are the requirements of Northern Territory? If we say SA, that's fine, but what are the requirements of SA? So if I look at, just as an example there, Mauro, we can have a look at South Australia, for example, and we can have a look at what are their state requirements, because we always need to be mindful of the state requirements as well. So if we look at carpenter, if you're applying for the 190, right, you need to be currently working in your nominated or closely related occupation for the last 12 months in Greater Adelaide, right? So you need to work there for 12 months before you're eligible to be nominated for the 190. For the 491, you need to be working in your occupation or a closely related occupation for 6 months before you're eligible. Okay. Now, as I say also, so 65 points will generally be enough. But yeah, so we really need to be mindful of the residency and work experience requirements of each state. Now in Queensland, you need to be living and working there for 3 months. Okay, so have a minimum of 3 months work experience. So that's for the thing. So if we look at skilled visas in Queensland, so for the 190 skilled workers, for example, living and working in Queensland. All right, so $190. So what are the requirements? If we look at, so for the 190, if you are lodging an expression of interest for the 190, provide evidence of full-time post-qualification experience, minimum of 35 hours per week, over the past 6 months in Queensland in your nominated occupation immediately prior to submitting your 491. Now, for the 491, the requirements are a little bit less. So provide evidence that you have been living in regional Queensland and undertaking full-time post-qualification employment, minimum of 35 hours a week over the past 3 months in your nominated occupation immediately prior to submitting your EOI. So yeah, you just really need to be mindful. Just because your occupation is on a state list, it doesn't mean you automatically qualify. You need to look into the state residency and also work experience requirements. Let's just have a look. Okay, so that's fine. Let's see if there's something in the chat, because we're going to have to wrap it up. So Maria Manosalva, in average for 2 years of study, how much are the tuition fees? Well, look, Maria, yeah, look, for a trade course, it could be anywhere from 12, to 22,000 for the 2 years. But really, I'm not an expert on the course fees. But most definitely reach out to Angelica at Go Native in Sydney and Natalia, Go Native in Melbourne, and they could be able to give you tailored quotes and specific prices. And I guess this is from Maria as well. I'm a manager of a kebab shop and at the same time studying my 2 years of hospitality. Well, I'm not sure, manager of a kebab shop, usually these type of shops are limited services. So I don't know if you're wanting to nominate the occupation restaurant manager or cafe manager. If so, look, I don't think a kebab shop would be suitable because it would have a limited service, limited menu. So primarily it should be a la carte menu. Sit down, order your food, and waitresses, waiters. So I'm not sure, but yeah, more than happy to. If you wanted to organize a initial consultation, we could definitely dwell further and see what your specific opportunities are. But generally speaking, a kebab shop wouldn't satisfy, would be considered a limited services and would trigger a couple of caveats. Also, Angelica here. So someone that has been working experience in joinery can go with the path of carpentry or has to stick to cabinet making. That's on. Yeah, look, so these are a little bit different. So carpentry, is a different occupation. So if you've got a skills assessment as a joiner, then you'd have to find work experience as a joiner, and vice versa. And cabinet making and carpentry can go with the path of carpentry or has to stick to the cabinet making. So cabinet making and carpentry are two different things. And if you have a look at the courses, and I'll just show you guys to illustrate that point. So if you look at the AQF qualifications, so if you look at cabinet making, so the course that you need is Certificate 3 in cabinet making, and this is the qualification code, right? So it's MSF. If you look at carpentry, it's obviously Certificate 3 in carpentry, and it's CPC. So it's a different training package altogether. So carpentry and joinery would be interchangeable, but cabinet making and carpentry are two separate things altogether. Okay, so I hope I've answered that question for you, Angelica. Okay. So, all right, cool, guys. Look, I'm going to have to wrap it up. Look, it's been a pleasure. I implore you guys to sort of, you know, look into things and get professional advice as much as you can, because things are becoming a lot more competitive. And too often I see a lot of international students who are lacking direction. But look, with the right empowerment and the right information, definitely there is pathways to PR, but you definitely need the right guidance, and if you've got the dedication and the right focus, there's a lot of chances for permanent residency. So I'd like to wrap it up there, guys. Thanks for your amazing questions and also for your participation today. I'd like to wish everyone all the very best and a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, because we're coming close to the silly season. You can have a look at their Go Native contact details, also Equestria Immigration. So Go Native, a lot of information about studying in Australia. Equestria Immigration, a lot of information about migration updates. Also, so please like the social media channels, because it's going to be advantageous to yourself with the information that you're going to get. I wish again everyone, I'd like to thank everyone for participating, and I wish everyone all the best, and hopefully we'll see you in the next series as well. But yeah, have a great day, everybody, and have a great evening, and look forward to seeing everyone in the future.